please welcome Professor Arvind Sharma, the chairperson for this plenary session. Professor Sharma, please conduct the session. I'm board member of the Board of Governors, Nalanda University.
Thank you all for coming and joining us. And I welcome you all indeed to this first plenary session of this conference. We have three speakers, Dr. Makarand Paranjpe, Dr. David Frawley, and myself, not necessarily in that order. So I will request each speaker to first introduce themselves and then specify the topic of their talk and then deliver the address. So I will first of all like to invite Dr. David Frawley to address us. Thank you all.
Namaste, Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. It is my great honor to be with you at the fourth Dharma-Dhamma conference. I am happy to say I was at the other three, and I'm also very happy to be with many of you from so many different meetings and places and gatherings over the years throughout India and over the world, particularly to Sri Ram Madhav for organizing these events, and for Nalanda University rising again. We're very happy to see this important phenomenon for another century and another era, and for India rising today. I was asked, first of all, to introduce myself. In the true Dharma-Dhamma tradition, I am still trying to figure out who I am. But what I could say is that I've discovered through Dharma and Dhamma that I'm much more than I thought I was, and yet also much of what I thought who I was was not me at all. So in any knowledge at various levels, yoga, Ayurveda, Vedanta, Jyotish, Itihasa, and so forth, Hindu Dharma, and still exploring and expanding it in various ways, and sharing it before various people and audiences throughout the world, including here in Bharat. And I'm happy to say, after working in this field for a few decades, that this cause of Dharma, and particularly in the cause of Dharma, Vedic knowledge, is spreading worldwide and has a recognition and a respect worldwide, in some respects even more so than what it has in certain circles in India today. But what most inspires me about Nalanda and these type of events is that we are seeing or witnessing the revival of what we call dharmic civilization. Dharma is not just a certain subset of civilization from the West, or civilization as your certain history books have told you. India was the source of this dharmic civilization that spread throughout Asia, Indochina, Indonesia, Tibet, China, Japan, Korea, and so forth to the east, but also Central Asia, Iran to the west. Even 4,000 years ago, you had kings with Sanskritic names ruling in regions like Syria, called the Mitanni, and intermarrying with the pharaohs, the families of the pharaohs of Egypt. You also have had, throughout history, the influence of the dharmic civilization worldwide and also through the Western world. So what is unique about the Dharmic civilizations, and why would we even give it a name or an identity? Dharmic civilization is, first of all, a way of understanding the whole of life and how we as human beings are integrated with the universe as a whole. So Dharmic civilization is not the human being apart, it's not simply human history, it's not just simply human geography, but it is our connection and our role in the greater conscious universe, which we contain inside of ourselves. So let us go into this term and aspect of Dharma a little bit more. Dharma itself as a term occurs in the oldest Rig Veda. Even in Rig Veda we have the term Dharma as Sanatana, which means not only eternal, it also means perpetually renewed. In other words, never fixed in name and form, but a living essence that adapts itself or that is reflected in every time, place, and person. Dharma reflects the nature and the laws of the universe as a whole, which is an unfoldment of life, consciousness, creativity that overflows all boundaries and limitations, seeking ever new transcendence and transformation. Our minds are caught up in this time-space reality that we see outwardly, and that is simply part of our practical functioning. We need to have various biological, psychological, sociological imperatives that cause us or require that we do certain things outwardly to survive. But inwardly, there is a deeper dimension, a deeper knowing, a deeper self, or a deeper presence. So what Dharma, first of all, teaches us is that the universe is a single being. There is an organic order to the universe, which is the order of Dharma. There is a single consciousness or presence behind the universe. In the Vedic thought, Dharma is most connected to this idea of consciousness, Atman or Purusha, that there is a unity, oneself in all beings. We are all organic formations of nature outwardly. We have the body and the mind. Our bodies have their organic structure and function, different limbs and organs, as we talk about Ayurveda, different doshas and pranas functioning and working through us. But there are certain constant forces of nature, elements and gunas, processes working inside of us. And we all have our different minds, our different points of view, the various movements of thought, emotion, sensation, reason, buddhi, manas, chitta, ahankara, as we describe in the Vedic way of looking at the mind. But behind these different instruments and their interplay of connections and forces, there is an inner unitary consciousness that is the foundation of the universe. This is the Shiva principle. This is the Satchit Ananda principle. This is the Paramatma. Or, as Vedas emphasize, this is the Purusha, Adi Purusha, Purushottama. We are a single person or being, and that wholeness, that Purnatva, is present in everyone and everything. At a higher level, we teach that all of time is present at every moment, and all of space is present at every place or at every single point. So this Purusha principle this principle of the conscious being is the pillar or the foundation of Dharma, and it is the basic dharmic principle behind the whole of life that links us all together. But as it expresses itself outwardly, it takes myriad names and forms like the giant banyan tree with its many different ground and aerial roots and leaves and branches going in various directions. So we are this great ocean of consciousness. The waves on the outside differ, but the inner essence, the inner depths of the sea are one. So this is the foundation of the Vedic view of the universe. One self and one being. At the same time, the human being is a model of the entire universe. This is the other reflection of the Purusha principle. Just as the human body has different limbs and organs and functions, so too society has different limbs and organs and functions, even though it is a single being. And that is what we need to understand outwardly. Outwardly, there has to be this diversity of functions, different actions, different things that are appropriate to time and place, circumstance, individual, and society. But behind all that, humanity is a single being. So when we talk about the social dharma, we first of all have to recognize that greater self behind all human beings. And then secondly, recognize that each individual has certain differences. We often define them more specifically as doshas, gunas, and karmas. And there needs to be an adjustment as per the individual, what he or she can do and what their place is in the universe as a whole. So on this foundation, the Vedas develop their dharmic view of life, and of course we have the understanding of the four dharmas, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. And here, these are all called dharmas, but here the first dharma is just understanding the nature of each thing and what each person is appropriate for. And here we run into something very interesting, because in nature, the dharma of things is very clear. Each animal has its particular dharma or behavior. Dharma is the property of things. Fire has its dharma or its capacity to burn. But for the human being, our dharma is not always fixed, and we don't always know who we are. In fact, overall, we don't know who we are at all. Our lives, our societies are enveloped in an underlying darkness or ignorance or avidya, or a partial type or a limited type of knowing. And this is what the Upanishads teach us so clearly. Our senses look outwardly into the realm of name and form, and we do not look within as to what is our essential nature or true being behind and beyond the body and mind. So as human beings, our dharma is sadhana. Our dharma is searching, seeking, inquiry, vichara into who we truly are, and also what is the nature of the universe in which we live. In fact, this universe is Maya. It is an appearance. And only when we learn to look behind the appearance can we find the truth. And what are we doing in most of our education? We are teaching people not to take things as they appear to be, but to look for what is the deeper truth behind it. The name, the form, the box, the appearance, the propaganda, and the reality are usually something very different. So our human dharma at the highest level is to look within. Dharma, artha, kama, moksha. We have certain dharmas or fundamental values that are behind our lives. We have artha, we have certain goals, certain values, certain substances, certain structures to support that. We have our kama, we have our enjoyment and our happiness. But our ultimate goal is the moksha, or the freedom of the consciousness, which is the full freedom of the creative expression and expansion. As the foundation for these four dharmas, we have what we call arogya, or physical and mental health and well-being. That's what we discussed to a very great extent in the field of Ayurveda, right principles of living, and so forth. But Dharmic traditions teach us that life is first of all a development of knowledge. Veda, Vidya, you can give it many different names, but not simply the outer knowledge, the name, the form, the number, the structure, but the inner essence, the inner knowing, the knowledge of being, the knowledge of presence, the knowledge of consciousness. And we can see this here when we begin to compare Dharmic civilization with the civilization of the Western world. The image of Dharmic civilization is, of course, the great guru in meditation, whether it is the seated Lord Buddha or the seated form of Lord Shiva, which is the oldest iconic form in India. We have it in the Harappan seals going back 5,000 years. And for the Western world, we often look at the thinker, Rodin's thinker, with his putting his fist to his head as if he had to make a tremendous physical effort in order to think. And we have it in the comparison of ideas. The Western philosophy through Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. The Vedic philosophy, aham brahm asmi, I am the entire universe. I am, therefore I think. At the same time, I am, so I don't need to think. Or thought can come spontaneously in many different ways. From many sides, wisdom arises. So this inner knowing, this self-knowledge, this direct experience of truth or reality, beyond concepts, beyond forms, beyond numbers, and yet pure presence of awareness is the ultimate goal of the Dharmic civilization and the Dharmic values. And then to reach that, one needs a certain way of life or code of conduct that we also call the Dharmic values. And of course, we have these most clearly defined in the Yoga Sutras with its yamas and niyamas. And we also here have very clear rules of psychological well-being and also social harmony and conduct, but they are not commandments and they are not human laws. They are universal principles. Ahimsa, you do not want to be harmed. No creature wants to be harmed. Respecting, therefore, the nature of life in the universe, you do not wish or cause harm to any other creature. So the principles of Dharma are based upon these universal principles. And out of this Dharmic civilization then developed a way of life seeking the inner knowledge as the highest goal. However, we as human beings have a variety of forces working within us. In the Vedic thought, we define these according to the three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas. So as these gunas are in play, we also need to understand and work with and adapt to them. These gunas exist in the human mind, they exist in the human society, and cause various structures to arise. So out of the dharmic values, a view of society where freedom is the seeking of higher awareness, not simply outer or material freedom, and knowledge as the seeking of higher consciousness, not simply name and form. In the Chandogya Upanishad, there's a very interesting dialogue where the role of devas and asuras is discussed. And it's said that those who believe that the body is the self are asuras, and those who believe that the consciousness in the self are the devas. By that standard, we live in an asuric world. And we've had this great clash over the last more than 1,000 years, where dharmic civilizations have largely been overwhelmed by civilizations having different values. I wouldn't necessarily call them adharmic civilizations, but they have not necessarily appreciated what dharmic civilizations are. And now the other factor I want to address here is the relevance of dharmic values and dharmic civilization in the world today. As you know, if you look at history books, even in India today, what is called the history of India is just a sidelight or a footnote to the history of Europe and the Western world. The dharmic civilizations have yet to totally claim their independence. And in that regard, India is still struggling to gain its intellectual and spiritual independence that was lost to a great degree during the colonial era and the long period of foreign rule. And that intellectual independence can only arise when there is this great study of Dharma once again. And the dharmic aspect of the mind is emphasized. In the yogic thought, we call this the sattvic buddhi, the buddhi or discernment that takes us to the eternal or the pure existence. Whereas what dominates the world today is the rajasic buddhi, in which ego, ahankara, name, form, possession, property, and identity prevails. So as the dharmic civilization arises, we also need to develop a more dharmic critique of civilization in the world and learn to take us to higher level of awareness and experience. Now, today, there is a tremendous crisis going on in the world at various levels. As we all know, the technology has developed to a very great extent, and the technological changes are going faster and faster, and yet in the process there is a greater losing and connection to our own inner being or reality. And in this regard, today more than ever, we need an awakening of dharmic values and dharmic civilization worldwide. Let me put this into a little bit of a perspective. Coming from the West, take a country like the United States today. We have the information technology, we have the affluence, and yet over half of our later adult population is suffering from depression, and there is a almost epidemic of depression and large number of people taking antidepressant drugs. We have unhappiness in the youth, and we have a greater disorientation from the organic roots of life. Now, as this technological civilization moves, it's gradually changing the way we think. It's also changing the flow of energy in our nervous system, and it's alienating ourselves from the very roots of life. Now, here we go back to the Dharmic idea of state and society. Dharmic idea of Rashtra is not of a modern political entity, a state formed like France or England or Germany centuries ago, or even a so-called modern state like India or China in the political sense. It is first of all a recognition of our connection as human beings with the land, with nature, and with all of the universe and all of other people. So what we need to do today is recognize that we need a higher way of action beyond technology. We need a higher way of consciousness so that the technology does not overwhelm us. As technology outwardly frees us from labor, frees us from outer necessity, more time is created, and that time needs to be developed towards creativity and spiritual awareness. And here, Dharmic civilization gives us the greatest science and way of knowledge, which is the science of consciousness and moving within. Modern medicine has reduced psychology to the chemistry of the brain and thinks that by manipulating brain chemistry, we can create a better life for human beings. That is not going to occur. There is a big debate in science in America, extending into politics, that artificial intelligence is superior to human intelligence. Artificial intelligence is capable even of consciousness. And we would be better off ruled by artificial intelligence, because then we would be free of emotion and other external factors that machines would not have. But the fact is, there is no artificial intelligence. There is only intelligence born of life and born of consciousness. So we need to understand the boundaries of the outer view of science and turn that vision once more within and develop our inner tools, our inner technology of inquiry and meditation through the different paths of yoga, different aspects of mantra, different techniques of meditation. In other words, the Dharmic civilization offers us the fruit of the spiritual knowledge and the inner connection with the universe as a conscious being, not just an external phenomenon, which is what we are truly evolving towards. So in the Dharmic view, consciousness pervades all of space. Intelligence is the essence of life. And the kind of social bonding we need is that inner aspiration towards the eternal and the infinite. And the kind of state that we need is one that gives value to the higher knowledge over all, not in exclusion to all, but as the fruit of all. And in that regard, India, with its Dharmic civilization, needs a revival within India itself. At the same time, this great Dharmic civilization and ways of knowledge, paths of yoga, ways of meditation, needs to spread again worldwide. And I believe that that is the movement of transformation in the coming century for humanity. And new type of institutions are necessary that are cultivating not only information but higher awareness and wisdom, power of attention, power of perception, ability to see things as they are rather than simply to accumulate data. Unless there is that awakening of the Dharmic civilization and more Dharmic educational institutions to bring about these higher human values and perceptions, humanity was going to have a lot of suffering and a lot of difficulties to go through. So it is my hope that Nalanda grows and flourishes and brings out the true spirit of the old Nalanda, which was that inner inquiry on all levels. Hinduism and Buddhism may differ in philosophies, names, forms, and personalities at an outer level, but they share that inner inquiry through yoga and meditation as the basis of human life. So more new ideas and insights. There are new dharmic ways of organizing society, human relationship, work, and career, as we have so many different changes going on in the world around us. A great new dharmic renaissance is necessary, east and west. And for that to occur, we must apply the mind, the intellect, and the heart outwardly and inwardly in this recognition of the unity and interdependence of all life, and in the ability of an individual with awareness, like Lord Buddha or Adi Shankara, to bring this transforming knowledge to the world as a whole. So Dharma becomes the principle, Karma Yoga becomes our way of life, and we are developing inner knowledge systems and to connect us to the greater conscious universe rather than just outer knowledge systems that get us bound to the external world. So I'm again very happy to be with you, and we look forward to this conference expanding, growing, and flourishing, and representing this new renaissance of Dharmic civilization for all humanity. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.
Thank you, Dr. Frawley, for that comprehensive exposition of Dharma. I would now like to invite Dr. Makarand Paranjpe to address us.
Professor Arvind Sharma, the chair of this session, my fellow panelist, Vamdev Acharya, Dr. David Frawley ji, Dharma and Academy elders and friends. Before I begin, I'd like to congratulate the conceiving and moving spirit of this conference series on Dharma-Dhamma, Sri Ram Madhavji. I was privileged to be at the opening conference at Sanchi, which was also the inauguration of the university in 2013. And I'm very happy to be here today when they've shifted the venue to Nalanda. I also want to congratulate and thank our host, Professor Sunaina Singh, the dynamic Vice Chancellor, there she is, who has been a friend and a colleague for over 30 years, and a fellow teacher of English, and the entire team who have made this magnificent conference possible. I was asked to introduce myself, so I'd like to introduce myself as a student of India. I also teach at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. And I am interested in narratives, I'm interested in stories, and I see myself as somebody who wants to make sense of the story of India, especially of modern India. And in that sense, I'm very glad that David Froliji has given us this magisterial overview of Dharma, starting from the Vedas. I'll concentrate on the modern phase of India, the story of India. I'm trying to develop a way of reading texts, which includes reading events as well, reading what nations do, and I call it intermedial hermeneutics. And I want to present to you a way in which I've tried to understand the story of modern India. So my paper is called Bharat Shakti and Swaraj towards the Second Indian Renaissance. So you can see how it dovetails or segues nicely from what Vamdevji was telling us. What is the relationship between dharma on the one hand and state and social order on the other hand? This is the question before us, and I think to explore this is crucial to our self-understanding and progress. Why do I say this? I say this because I believe we are on the brink of a second Indian Renaissance. The first, which was quite well documented, began as the Bengal Renaissance because its first glimmers, or should I say tremors, were felt in that province of India, but soon spread to every nook and cranny of the subcontinent. This Renaissance worked its action roughly over 150 tumultuous years from the late 18th century to the early 20th century. It was no accident that it coincided with the British colonization of India, for arguably its greatest achievement was also India's independence. We achieved political independence, as we all know, in 1947. But most well-informed commentators of that momentous tryst with destiny would agree that independence was certainly the first, but definitely not the last step in our journey. The work of Purna Swaraj, of which we shall talk in greater length soon, is far from over. Today, I would hazard to guess, or rather, I would hazard to assert that we are lucky to participate in the second independence of India, which I date to 2014 with the election of a BJP government at the center and Narendra Modi as our Prime Minister. Lest this sound like an exaggerated claim, let me explain. Our first independence was political and to some extent economic. The second, I hope, will be far more wider and deeper. It will also be cultural, social, civilizational, and indeed spiritual. But for that to happen, we must understand really what Swaraj is, how deeply embedded this idea is in the dharmic bedrock and soil of India. The Constitution of India may well run the Indian state, but it is dharma that, in large measure, still regulates Indian society. Isn't it therefore curious, friends, that the very Constitution that we swear by does not have, as far as I know, even a single mention or instance of the word dharma in it? This absence is all the more glaring, not only because dharma has been the foundation of social ethics and polity in India, but because Dr. Babasaheb Bhimrao Ambedkar, the chief architect of our constitution, in his work, The Buddha and his Dhamma, himself argued in favor of a dharmic basis of our civic and political life. Let me quote him. Religion, it is said, is personal, and one must keep it to oneself. One must not let it play its part in public life. Contrary to this, Dhamma is social. It is fundamentally and essentially so. Dhamma is righteousness, which means right relations between man and man in all spheres of life. From this, it is evident that one man, if he is alone, does not need Dhamma. But when there are two men living in relation to each other, they must find a place for Dhamma, whether they like it or not. Society has to choose one of the three alternatives. I'm still quoting Dr. Ambedkar. For Dhamma is nothing if it is not an instrument of government. This means society chooses the road to anarchy. That's one option. The second option is society must choose a police state, dictatorship as an instrument of government. Thirdly, society may choose Dhamma, plus the magistrate wherever people fail to observe Dhamma. In anarchy and dictatorship, liberty is lost. Only in the third case does liberty survive. Those who want liberty must therefore have Dhamma, unquote. This is Dr. Ambedkar's language and words. Following Dr. Ambedkar's lead, I propose that the second phase of the Indian Renaissance will not be complete till we can end the schizophrenia between these two. Thank you. The India that is supposedly run by the Constitution and Bharat that is a dharmic republic. This, friends, is the main point of my paper. But to explain it better, I would like to revisit crucial ideas and events of the first phase of the Indian Renaissance. And I'm going to bring up some things today which some of you may have already read or heard of, but I hope I'm also going to bring up things that are not all that familiar. The work of India's freedom or Swarajya was not merely political or economic or even social. Its bedrock was actually cultural and spiritual. In India's rebirth, she not only rediscovered her ancient past, which is what happened in Europe, in the European Renaissance. They went back to their pre-Christian, so to speak, pagan roots in Greek and Roman civilization. But it also asserted her undying spiritual power. It was Bankim Chandra Chatterjee who, in Anandamath, 1882, gave the nation its heroic battle cry, Vande Mataram, or Hail to the Mother. But such ideas were very much in the air. Kiran Chandra Bandyopadhyay had earlier written a play, Bharat Mata, which was first performed in 1873. In fact, Bankim himself had composed his anthem, Vande Mataram, as a standalone poem some 7 or 8 years before he was inspired to incorporate it into his novel, thus stirring the dormant nationalistic fervor of a conquered land. Bankim not only gave India a new mantra, but also a new deity to worship and invoke with it, Mother India herself. The word Swaraj was reportedly first used in its modern political and ideological sense by Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak. In 1895, Tilak initiated a program to celebrate Shivaji's birthday. To this end, he established the Shri Shivaji Fund Committee. He also undertook to restore Shivaji's Samadhi at Raigad, a fort in Maharashtra. The following year, which is in 1896, on the 15th of April, he held the first Shivaji festival. And this is what he said. He said, we should be grateful to those heroes who upheld the honor and dignity of our nation. Shivaji was our national hero who established Swarajya and liberated the people. The celebration of Shivaji festival is an occasion for expressing our gratitude to him. If we cherish the memories of our national heroes, we can promote in ourselves a nationalist attitude. For promoting the sense of nationality, it is necessary to have national heroes whom people can worship as idols. This is from his speeches and writings, page 216. Swaraj for Tilak meant, first of all, and I'm quoting Tilak again, 1, the ruler and the ruled must belong to one group and one nation, unquote. Secondly, Swaraj refers to the rule of law. The state should be governed by law, unquote. Thirdly, Swaraj for Tilak meant a democratic form of government. Quote, government must be elected by the people and must be responsible to them, unquote. Finally, Swaraj to Tilak also implied a welfare state. State should be established for the overall development of individuals, unquote. Now, you see, this whole idea of the Shivaji Utsav starts in Maharashtra, but then it quickly moves to Bengal. There's a man called Sakharam Ganesh Deuskar, 1869 to 1912, who was born in Bihar but raised and domiciled in Bengal. And inspired by Tilak, he started a Shivaji Utsav in Kolkata in 1903, where he actually distributed a pamphlet which he called Shivajir Mahatva, which he then called Shivajir Diksha. Deuskar had written an important Bengali tract called Desher Katha, exposing the economic depredations of colonial rule. He had used Dadabhai Navroji and Romesh Chandra Dutt for his sources. But what he actually did was to bring the cult of Shivaji to Bengal. And in his Utsav of 1905, he invited Rabindranath Tagore to contribute a poem. Tagore actually wrote a poem on Shivaji, and in it he exhorts, according to Tagore, it's a poem in which Shivaji's guru, Samartha Ramdas, exhorts Shivaji to don the Gerua Vastra of the sannyasi and to practice Raj Dharma and to rule his kingdom as a representative of Dharma. So this is Tagore's poem. For Deuskar, Tilak and many freedom fighters, Shivaji thus became a nationalist, a Swaraj warrior who resisted the imperial might of the Mughals. The idea of Swaraj caught on, picked up by Dadabhai Navroji in 1906 for the Congress session. Sri Aurobindo, who was in the service of the progressive nationalist sympathizer, the Maratha prince, the Gaikwad, Sayaji Rao of Baroda, at that time, began to visit the National Congress sessions in 1904 in Bombay and the Banaras Congress of 1905. He was then the vice principal of Baroda College, but already well onto his yogic path. He had been initiated by Yogi Lele, and he had done some experiments in pranayam and other things. There was also a gentleman called Mr. Devdhar who showed him pranayam. And I've actually been to that house where he learned both pranayam and had his first yogic realizations in the Muzumdar Vada. Anyhow, Sri Aurobindo was the first to ask for Purna Swaraj, or complete independence from the British, which was at that time regarded as an audacious, if not seditious, demand. He had also met Tilak, who had impressed him greatly. As we all know, and I can skip this part, the Garamdal, Narandal, and the split of the Indian National Congress in the Surat session, supposedly engineered by Sri Aurobindo. They threw chairs at each other, by the way, and Sri Aurobindo observes, I was sitting at the back and enjoying it unfold. But here's the point. While still in Baroda in 1905, Sri Aurobindo received an intriguing message in a séance which his brother, Barindra, the revolutionary, he was the medium in the séance. And the spirit of Sri Ramakrishna gave him the order in 2 words in Bangla, Mandir Godo. Sri Aurobindo interpreted it as a commandment to propagate a new revolutionary creed based on the consecration of a temple to Mother India. This would not be a physical temple as much as a nationwide invocation of Mother India as Bharat Shakti or Bhavani Bharati. On Sri Aurobindo's part, Bhavani Mandir was the result, an extraordinary manifesto to free India written in 1905. A copy of this pamphlet was submitted as evidence in the Alipur bomb case in 1809 and 1808-1809, with Barindra's signature on the cover and police markings all over it. 13 minutes, 19 seconds. I've got a clock on. Sri Aurobindo starts with a startling assertion. Now, see, Bharat Shakti, this Bhavani Mandir is a text which not everybody knows. So I'm going to read a little bit from it, quote a little bit from it. So Sri Aurobindo starts with this startling assertion, quote, "We in India fail in all things for want of Shakti." My friend Shakti Sinha is here, and I completely agree. So we got the Shakti when he walked in, just before this session started. "We in India fail in all things for want of Shakti." Quote, "We have all things else, but we are empty of strength, void of energy. We have abandoned Shakti and are therefore abandoned by Shakti." Unquote. The consequences of such weakness are disastrous, as the heading of another section asserts. Quote, "Our knowledge is a dead thing for want of Shakti." Unquote. Sri Aurobindo asks, is it knowledge that is wanting in India? We Indians are born and bred in a country where jnana has been stored and accumulated since the race began, and we bear in it the inherited gains of many thousands of years. Unquote. Yet our knowledge is almost useless. It cannot save us. Why? Because, as Sri Aurobindo puts it, it lacks strength. It is therefore, quote, "a dead language, a burden under which we are bowed, a poison which is corroding us, rather than as a staff to support our feet and a weapon in our hands," unquote. The reason is simple. Our knowledge is weighed down with a heavy load of tamas, says Sri Aurobindo, under which lies the curse of impotence and inertia. If India has been a knowledge society for millennia, we have also not been lacking in bhakti or devotion. But again, as Sri Aurobindo says, our bhakti cannot live and work for want of shakti, unquote. Without strength, even devotion is useless. He says, in the absence of shakti, we cannot concentrate, we cannot direct, we cannot even preserve bhakti. He says, if we have strength, everything else will be added to us easily and naturally. Sri Aurobindo says India must be reborn to manifest its strength and genius. And for India to be reborn, India cannot be weak. If it is weak, it will perish. This is what Sri Aurobindo says. Sri Aurobindo next comes to the main point of Bhavani Mandir, which is, what is a nation? And he answers, the nation is the Shakti of its millions. India, he says, is not a piece of earth, not a figure of speech, nor a fiction of the mind. It is a mighty Shakti composed of all the Shaktis of the millions of units that make up the nation. This is Bhavani Bharati, the living unity of the 300 millions of Indians. We can quickly see that it echoes Vande Mataram. He's really taking from Bankim here, isn't he? And just to show that this was not some random idea that Sri Aurobindo put out, even at the end of his most productive phase, the Arya phase, in 1918, in December, he writes this wonderful essay called Is India Civilized?, which then becomes a part of the foundations of Indian culture. And again, Sri Aurobindo offers a unique understanding of nationalism. He says, I quote, each nation is a Shakti or power of the evolving spirit in humanity and lives by the principle it embodies. India is Bharat Shakti, the living energy of a great spiritual conception, and fidelity to it is the very principle of her existence, unquote. Now the question arises, why should India be reborn? What's in it for the rest of the world, right? Is it just some selfish or, self-assertion, maybe to go and control and exploit others? And Sri Aurobindo says no. He says, and I quote, India must be reborn because a rebirth is demanded by the future of the world. He says India's dharma and destiny is to show the inner light, the wisdom of self-realization, and the truth of higher consciousness to the world. And it is because of this, and I quote Sri Aurobindo, he says, India cannot perish. It is most essential for the future of the human race, unquote. This is quite a proclamation, one which other nations may well disagree with or dispute. And of course, many Indians will not agree with this. I live and work in JNU, and people will laugh at these ideas. But I think that if Indians become more aware of who we are and what our civilizational orientation and genius really is, then I think won't it be better that such Atma Vidya will allow us to shine with our inner light rather than remaining as imitators of the West, as second-class citizens in a world that is not of our own making. India's true calling, India's true calling, according to Sri Aurobindo, is that she, I quote, it is who must send forth from herself the future religion of the entire world. And he calls it the eternal religion, which is to harmonize all religion, to harmonize science and philosophies, and to make mankind one soul, unquote. Of course, by eternal religion, Sri Aurobindo means Sanatan Dharma. There's no doubt about that, and he says it quite categorically once again. So he writes this in Bhavani Mandir, 1905. He goes to jail. He has a bunch of really important spiritual experiences and realizations. He's released in 1909. He comes out, and the first talk he gives is at Uttarpada after being released on 30th May 1909. And this is what he says. This speech everybody knows. He says that when India shall rise, I'm quoting him, it is Sanatan Dharma that shall rise. When India shall be great, it is Sanatan Dharma that shall be great. When it is said that India shall expand and extend herself, it is Sanatan Dharma that shall expand and extend itself all over the world. It is for the Dharma and by the Dharma alone that India exists, unquote. Now, please let's understand that Sanatan Dharma is no narrow sectarian ideology or set of beliefs. Sri Aurobindo says clearly that what we call the Hindu religion, and I'm quoting him here, is the eternal religion because it is a universal religion. It embraces all others. And he says, if a religion is not universal, it cannot be eternal. A narrow religion, a sectarian religion, an exclusive religion can only live for a limited time and for a limited purpose, unquote. So, the Renaissance we seek, 20 minutes, 59 seconds. The Renaissance we seek, then, cannot be accomplished without the full efflorescence of such a universal and all-embracing, world-uplifting Dharma. So, let me skip and come to the end of my talk. Let me finish before my 30 minutes. If we really believe in the spiritual regeneration of India, which all the great sages, savants, and leaders of recent times have urged upon us, in fact prophesied, then we must rise to the challenge working together. Unity is the need of the hour, not division. Our watchword should be harmony, not conflict. But is it enough only to what we do to play this role on the world stage? Is it enough, as Ram Madhav ji was saying to me, to pose with other great powers at photo ops or get pats on our back from the World Bank on our GDP growth rate? Where is the wide-ranging institution building initiative that will take us forward? Where is the leadership and vision to back our drive? We hear so much about capacity building these days, but isn't it true that for the last several decades, we've had a tradition of capacity crippling? The purpose of our second independence movement is to liberate ourselves from those structures that hinder and handicap our self-understanding and our self-realization. Our second independence is not to free us from foreign yoke, but from false and detrimental notions of ourselves, or to be more precise, from the foreigner within, our intimate enemy, that image of ourselves which we have internalized over centuries of slavery and degradation. This work we must do ourselves. No one else can do it for us. But our elites are so used to taking directions from others, so used to regarding ourselves and our people as inferior, secondary in the order of things, minor, not yet adult or grown up. Both our Muslim and British rulers treated us with contempt, taught us to despise ourselves. This must change. A polity that is sundered in the most unscrupulous vote bank politics and a social order segregated by caste, language, region, and community, which has marked our national life, must change. We still hesitate to seek, let alone exercise, real power in the real world. When we do so, sometimes it is negative, reactive, or counterproductive. All this must change. We are not Western, modern, legalistic, techno-scientific, capitalist, socialist, secularist, or what have you. Though these labels have been imposed on us, sometimes we have taken them on ourselves. Whatever our religion, ethnicity, language, or region, we are dharmic people, Sanatanis, Bharatiyas, not just culturally, but socially, politically, economically, and most importantly, spiritually. The sooner we accept this, the sooner we will end our schizophrenia and fractured mentality. It is not that everything in our past is good and glorious, or that everything that we ourselves eagerly sought and imported from the West is abominable and injurious. The reassertion of dharma in this land of its birth should not imply any such uncritical revival nor unthinking reaction. Rather, it should result in a new birth, a true and far-ranging renaissance in which the best of the past the most beneficial of the present are wedded to produce a future that is far more superior, far more superb than either or both. Nothing short of this evolutionary leap will suffice the imperatives of our times. Thank you very much. 25 minutes.
Thank you, Makran, for that. But before I say anything else, I must apologize to the speakers for reminding them of the tyranny of the temporal limitations to which all of us are subject, even as I subject myself to it. I've already introduced myself, but let me just say for the sake of form that my name is Arvind Sharma, and I teach at McGill University in Montreal, Canada. The topic of my presentation is Dharma or religion. And I have an argument to develop, so I think I'll read it out. I will not share in the spontaneous brilliance of improvised presentations you have been enjoying so far. Some members of the audience might find the title of this presentation puzzling. After all, don't we use the word dharma regularly as a synonym for the English word religion in the course of daily discourse in India? For instance, we use the word dharma-nirapeksh to translate the English word secular, where the word dharma obviously means religion in the context of its dissociation with the state. Or when we use the word sarva dharma sambhav to represent an Indian understanding of secularism as indicating equal respect for all religions. In both these understandings of the word secular in India, the word dharma has been used to translate the English word religion. Similarly, when the Indian census collects data on the number of followers of a religion, these data are presented in Hindi translation as representing the various dharmas of India. This easy rendering of the English word religion by the Indian word dharma is not restricted to Hindi, but applies virtually to all the major languages of India. So, we use the word dharma to render the English word religion, not only at the regional level, but also at the national level. It is the purpose of this presentation to indicate how much is lost in this translation. I am going to argue that, indeed, a whole world of religious meaning is lost in this translation, with serious consequences for our own understanding of our own concept of religion, within inverted commas. The Western word religion carries with it the connotations it has in relation to the Abrahamic religions. Abrahamic religions is the term by which the three religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are referred to collectively. These three religions are characterized by the following three features. They are conclusive, they are exclusive, and they are separative. They are conclusive in the sense that they constitute God's final revelation to human beings. They are exclusive in that by and large, only those who belong to these religions will be saved. and they are separative in the sense that one can only belong to these religions by separating oneself from every other religion. Or in other words, one cannot be a Jew, a Christian, and a Muslim at the same time, although all these three religions believe in only one God. The four religions of Indian origin, however, namely Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, do not always share these characteristics. They rarely insist that they are the final revelation of God to human beings, or that only those that follow them will be saved, or that one can only belong to one of them to the exclusion of the other. Moreover, these religions are non-proselytizing. They accept followers but do not seek them. This last point requires some qualification. Judaism, although a member of the Abrahamic religious tradition, has been a non-proselytizing religion for most of its history, and Buddhism has been actively missionary. However, in order to become a Buddhist, one does not have to give up one's previous religious affiliation, whereas this does not hold true of the Abrahamic religions. When the British introduced census operations in India in 1871, or from 1871 onwards rather, they gradually moved towards adopting the Western concept of religion in an Indian context, according to which one could only subscribe to one religion at a time. The insistence that an Indian could belong to only one religion at a time has serious consequences for the religious reality of India, in which the followers of religions of Indian origin did not distinguish themselves from each other that sharply. The result of the census operation is dramatized by the fact that whereas in India, Hinduism and Buddhism are treated as two different religions, the lived reality in Nepal continues to conform to an earlier reality in which the same person could be a follower of both these religions. As the German scholar Axel Michaels reports, and I quote him now, a Nepali asked if he was a Hindu or a Buddhist answered, yes. All these answers may be imagined with a typical Indian gesture, the head slightly bent and softly tilted, the eyelids shut, the mouth smiling. End of quote. In other words, the Indian religious reality was not always adverse to dual or not adverse to the acceptance of dual or multiple religious identity. But the census operations, by insisting on a singular religious identity, began to modify the Indian religious reality in such a way that the four religions of Indian origin began to acquire a fixed and separate identity in place of an earlier overlapping fluid identity. This overlapping nature of these traditions is dramatized by the fact that when Mahatma Gandhi went to London to study law at the age of 18, the 3 oaths of abstention from wine, meat, and women as a precondition for his departure, insisted on by his Hindu mother, were administered to him by a Jain monk. It is my conclusion that the use of the word religion in the Western sense of implying an exclusive religious identity has resulted in the distortion of Indian religious reality overdrawn. Perhaps not if we take the case of Japan into account. Japan does not insist on a Western notion of religion in its census, in the sense that its citizens are free to identify themselves as followers of as many religions as they like. The religious census operations, its religious census figures appear as follows. For the year 1985, Buddhist, 92 million. Shinto, 115 million. Christian, 1 million. New religions, 14 million. Total, 223 million. The total population of Japan in 1985 was 121 million. In other words, 95% of the population of Japan, declared itself to be the followers of Shinto. And 76% of the same population also declared itself to be followers of Buddhism. It does not seem unreasonable, perhaps it does not seem unreasonable to suggest, perhaps it would not seem unreasonable to suggest that the contours of the religious landscape of India would have been similar to that of Japan if the option of indicating membership of more than one religion was available to Indians. Another development seems to suggest that we may be moving in the right direction in questioning the application of the Western concept of religion if we extend our discussion beyond India to the larger Asian reality. This move is suggested by the fact that 4 major culture zones of Asia, India, China, Korea, and Japan, had trouble dealing with the European word religion. We noted above that India had to coin a new meaning. India had to coin a new meaning to accommodate the English word religion. What I mean by that statement is that the Indian word dharma did not possess the meaning of exclusive religious identity implied by the English word religion, so that its meaning had to be narrowed to make it a synonym of the English word. While India had to coin a new meaning, so to say, Japan had to coin a new word, namely shukyo, and subsequently China coined zhongxiao and Korea zhongyo. What this seems to indicate is that the European word religion is a poor fit in the case of the Asian religious reality. This is obvious in the case of India and Japan, where a multiple religious identity has often been the norm. China seems like an outlier, but only in a superficial sense, for the lived reality in pre-communist China was very similar to that in India, inasmuch as Sanqiao, or the 3 teachings of Confucianism, Taoism, and Chinese Buddhism, were not considered mutually exclusive. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, does the Indian reality, do we have to change the Indian reality to make it conform to the semantic conventions of a European language? So I conclude with the suggestion that when Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are described as religions, then the religions of India, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism in India, Confucianism, Taoism, Chinese Buddhism in China, and Shinto and Japanese Buddhism in Japan should be referred to as dharmas and not religions. To avoid their conflation with the Western world religion and thereby preserve the integrity of the religious traditions of Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Arvind Sharma, Member, Board of Governors, Nalanda University, for conducting a superb session which has enabled a splendid blast and a takeoff for the conference. May I now request you, sir, to felicitate the two speakers, Dr. David Frawley, Padma Bhushan awardee, and Professor Makran Paranjape with bouquets and mementos. Or just mementos. Thank you. May I request Shri Sakti Sinha, Director, Nehru Memorial Museum Library, New Delhi, to come on stage and felicitate Professor Arvind Sharma with a memento. With this, we conclude the inaugural plenary session.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will now reconvene at 6:30 at the seminar room, which is next to the Buddha Lounge, for a special event by India Foundation, which is the Kushak Bakula Memorial Lecture. This will be delivered by two distinguished guests, Professor Samdong Rinpoche from Dharamshala, the Foreign Policy Advisor to the Mongolian President, Mr. Tumen, will also be with us. This session will be significantly shared by Director of India Foundation and the National General Secretary of the BJP, Mr. Ram Madhav. So I request you all to please assemble at seminar room at 6:30. We'll begin the lecture there.
This will be followed by a cultural event at 8 o'clock at the same venue, which is Seminar Hall in the Nexe building, and dinner. Thereafter, we will come back tomorrow morning and reassemble at the same seminar hall at 9 a.m. Thank you.